I'm doing this so some of you may get to know me after I'm long gone. My first memory of life is when my father came home from World War II. I hadn't seen him because when I was born, he was already over in the war. So he was there for 3 years. I remember the day, even though I was only 3 years old when he came home, going to the door. My mother had me go to the door to greet him. And it was the first time I seen my dad. So it was a very important part of my life, finally getting to see my father. So that's the first memory I really have. The next memories I have are when I would come home from school in the kindergarten, and sometimes when I was coming home, I would pass my grandpa who would be laying on the sidewalk drunk, and nobody would pick him up. So even as I was small, I'd try and get him over to the building so he could at least sit against the building. Both my grandfathers at that time were alcoholics. Where I went, I didn't get to go home after school. I went to my mother's and father's beer garden. There I would stay until my sister got out of school and I would go home with her. So I remember being in the bar, playing shuffleboard, talking to the drunks. Sometimes they'd make it a funny thing for me to carry a drunk out the door. But one of the interesting things was that I liked beer at the time. So I would get an opener and I would sneak back in the cooler and I'd open beer and drink it until I passed out. So I was kind of an alcoholic at 5 years old. We would have mini parties and all the people, all my uncles and aunts, and I had 56 uncles and aunts at one time. They would always give me beer to drink. And again, almost until I passed out. And I was only 5 years old at the time. So anyway, as I was saying, we being Wisconsin Synod, we would have them come around the pastor would come for confession on Saturday night. And one Saturday night, when the pastor came, my brother and sister were holding me down upstairs because I got into Dad's Sigmund 7, the liquor, and I was drunk. And here I was upstairs drunk, and the pastor was downstairs with my parents. This happened in about 1947. I was born in 1942, April 18th. So you can tell I was only 5 years old at that time. So those are my first memories and things that people have reminded me of. But I always remember going to all my cousins and uncles and aunts, and we'd have great Christmases. Usually on Saturday or Christmas Eve, we would go to my grandparents on my mother's side, and we'd have a big party, and all my aunts and uncles and all my cousins from that side of the family would be there. Now you have to understand, again, in that family, they had 12 children, so they had a lot of cousins for me to play with, and it was always a lot of fun. And my grandfather, his name was Joseph Sauvé. He came from Quebec, and he was also an alcoholic, unfortunately, but for some reason he loved to tease me, and we really had a lot of fun together. Although he could be a very mean drunk at times. But it was good times. I'd get to go and stay at their house with Grandma and Grandpa and have a good time with them. I also, my other grandparents, then on the Christmas Day, we'd have a party for all of my father's side of the family. Now, they had also 12 children in that family, but later on in life, Grandpa remarried after my grandmother died, and he had 6 children after the age of 65. So 6 years in a row he had children. The 7th year, the child was born, stillborn. And they always teased my poor grandpa that the reason for that one is because he had fallen off a ladder and broken both hips. But the interesting thing about Grandpa Bittner was, of the 16 children, he delivered all of them at home. Something that you'd never see in the world today. So those are my early memories. Going to school was no big thing. I remember my mother one time, we were going on a field trip. I was probably in the 5th grade at the time, and she made me a beautiful green coat. So my mother was very good at sewing. And she could make almost everything. And at that time, we had sold the bar, and Dad went into another business, a cleaning business. And well, I guess a funny way of saying it, he lost his shirt. So they lost all their money, and we were a very poor family. So we went from being a very wealthy family to a very poor family. So I was kind of used to the better things in life, and all of a sudden they weren't there. So it was a huge adjustment that I had to make as a little person, probably 9, 10 years old. Didn't have the nice clothes like the other kids that went to school had. So it was a little dramatic for me at that time of life.